Jumpin' In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Good evening.
And welcome. And yes, here we are again, a Saturday night. We could be moving. I'll just flag that up now. So remember, a Saturday night, it is 9 o'clock, which means the best in modern and contemporary jazz, of course, with Jumpin' In. Myself, H.
And me, Chris. Yes, welcome along to this week's show, and what a show we've got for you tonight. Did you know, on this day in 1927, Lindbergh was landing the Spirit of St. Louis in Paris, having completed his first solo flight across the Atlantic. And 5 years later today, Amelia Earhart was the first woman to do the same, landing near Londonderry. And in 1977, Stevie Wonder's tribute to Ellington, Sir Duke, began a 3-week run as chart topper on this day. So all stars of the jazz age in their way, much the same as every week we have a selection of the best modern and contemporary jazz stars on Jumpin' In. So who has been flying high for you this week, H, and who's filled you with wonder?
Oh, there's a happy link. I once built a model of the Spirit of St. Louis, I believe. We're looking forward to BrujazzWe.
Woohoo!
Yes, coming up in just a week's time, hopefully. Unless something goes bang, we will be there for the first time in 2 or 3 years. So a bit of music from one of my favourite bands, Brussels Side. And going back a bit to the 1950s is something I heard recently. And we were talking about Japanese pianists. Perhaps she was one of the first Japanese pianists to hit the modern jazz scene. And SCO goes low.
And from me, well, my selection of Top Guns are flying before the wind, over the bright lights of the big city, meditating in the dark. And we'll start the show in hell. Well, not exactly, but here's Naraka from the Maxime Bender Orchestra. Luxembourg-based Maxime Bender, the composer, arranger and saxophonist. He put this big band together back in 2011 and recorded the project over November and December with simultaneous sessions on both sides of the Atlantic. And what a great band this is. I came across a second-hand copy, as you do, still sealed and cling-wrapped and about 11 years old, with one CD and an accompanying DVD of the band recorded live in Luxembourg in 2013. Great set of original compositions, beautifully played and arranged, and featuring stars from both sides of the pond, really, with a number of WDR award-winning musicians in the 25-strong band, including Pablo Held on piano, and a number of great guests, including Donny McCaslin on sax, Marshall Gilks on trombone, Frédéric Costa on trumpet, and on that we heard a solo from Riaz Kerbapur on guitar and Christoph Mokel on alto. If you can't find a bargain bin copy, then it is available off all the popular download channels.
Yeah, always the way. Good stuff, and a great way to get going this evening. From big to small, and going to another part of the world as well, Japan. We were talking last week about Japanese pianists. Perhaps Hiromi may be the sort of best-known exponent of the Japanese piano trio kicking round at the moment on the modern scene with a wonderful technique. Very lively. But who was the first one? Perhaps the first Japanese pianist to come to international acclaim? Well, I would guess it was probably Toshiko Akiyoshi. And I heard a little bit the other day, I think on J to Z or one of the programmes on Radio 3. I thought, God, that's a nice track. And it turned out to be from her very first album, which was entitled Toshiko's Piano. From that album, Blues for Toshiko. Great stuff. Going back to the 1950s. 1953 to be exact. That's amazing. 1953. A long time ago, before my time even. Toshiko's Piano, or the amazing Toshiko Akiyoshi, as it was released in Japan. Her debut recording, Japan 1953, with Herb Ellis on guitar on some tracks, bassist Ray Brown, and J.C. Hurd on the drums, known at the time, of course, for working with Oscar Peterson. For indeed, it was Oscar who played a gig in Japan in that year. He spotted her at a jazz club newly opened. Toshiko was playing there, and he was really sort of very much taken by it, and hence had a chat with her afterwards and basically set her up with his rhythm section to record this album, originally released as a 10-inch on Norman Grantz's Norgran record label, and then a CD reissue in Japan. And actually the track we heard there was from a slightly later album, which was Toshiko and Leon Sash at Newport. Cracking stuff though, really enjoyed that. I've always enjoyed a bit of Toshiko Akiyoshi. Married Charlie Mariano for several years, of course, and if you see that one knocking around, I think she did an album with him called something like the Mariano Akiyoshi Quartet. It's got a picture of the pair
then
of them.
Lou Tabakin. In fact, she was married to Lou Tabakin.
I think they divorced, didn't they? And
Yes.
Charlie died years ago.
Yeah.
And then she married Lou Tabakin. And I can't remember whether they're still together or not, to be honest.
No, I don't think so. I'm not.
I don't think
we,
so
but we did have Lou on the show, didn't we? We bumped
We
into
did,
him
yeah,
twice.
2 or 3 years ago.
Last time we went to
6 or 7
Brussels.
years ago.
Last time we went to Brussels Jazz Marathon. In fact, it was. I think 3 years ago. Next, by pure coincidence, I sometimes think we're psychic. You may wonder how we put the music together on this show. We don't sit down and meticulously plan. We bring along a bunch of records each and sit down and enjoy bringing them to you. But from me, another new release this time from a Japanese pianist and composer who's very much up and coming, Megumi Yonezawa and her trio. The album's called Resonance, and here's the opening track, Before the Wind. Very good sustain on that piano. Megumi Yunezawa and her trio with Before the Wind, a natty little number in 11/8 for those of you who are counting. Megumi began her studies of classical piano aged 6 in Japan before travelling to study after winning an award to the prestigious Berklee College of Music, making New York her home. She became the regular pianist for Greg Osby on the recommendation of Jason Moran, who'd been one of her tutors, and subsequently met her long-standing trio companions whilst recording a session, a bit like your previous story, for Norwegian guitarist Jolstein Gulbrandsen. And they've been together ever since. A lovely, thoughtful album of great, relaxed and confident playing this that bears many listenings, I think. And thanks very much to Sunnyside Records for sending us that.
Some terrific stuff on Sunnyside, it has to be said. There's so much I can't get through it, but I'll check that one out. Really nice indeed, and always interesting music coming out of Japan one way or another. Listening to Jumpin' In, the best in modern and contemporary jazz with Chris and myself, H. And hopefully, all fingers crossed, and assuming nothing else goes bang, and you can never tell in the world these days, can you? So I'll believe it when we're there. But BrujazzWe, what used to be the Brussels Jazz Marathon, is back in all its glory next weekend, and we fully intend to be there. The forecast, amazingly, looks all right, as it usually is, actually. It'll almost certainly be warmer than the Isle of Man, I'll say that. Shouldn't
It did snow one year, just be careful what you think.
Yeah, it was bad one year. Anyway, we will be there, hopefully. It's always a wonderful weekend, and you never know quite what you're going to get. Occasionally, there are artists we recognise, but for every one there are that we recognise, I would say there's another 4 or 5 we've never heard of before. That's not to say they can't be brilliant, and we've made some great discoveries of... essentially, it's a celebration of Belgian jazz, and it's a cracking scene if you are not aware of it. One of my favourite bands to come out of the Brussels area in Belgium over the last few years is Rêve d'Éléphant Orchestra. Very eclectic, very sort of new worldy, it's a mixture of new world folk, jazz, sort of a few poppy elements. I don't know where it comes from, world music. It's a real melange, a melting pot of different sounds. Interestingly, they did play live a few years ago. I have to say, I think the CDs do their music more service than the live in that particular gig did. Anyway, here's one. They also have quirky names for their tracks and their albums. So, Rêve d'Éléphant, Elephant's Dream. The album, this one's called Why Not a Lobster? The track is called My Elephant. Rêve d'éléphant, Elephant's Dream, back in 2010. That was recorded, I believe. An eclectic band. You probably won't recognise many of the names. Pierre Bernard on flutes, Michel Debrul on drums and percussion, Benoît Steele on guitars, Michael Massoir on tubas, trombone and voice, Etienne Plumet on drums and percussion, a lot of percussion and drums-based music, as you can tell, Stefan Pugin on drums, Baran de Broeke, congas and percussion, and Alain Van Cove on electronics and trumpet. Several albums out on the De Verve label, and like I say, all with quirky names. The one after this, I think it was called Lobster Caravan. They're obsessed with lobsters and seafood for some reason, but but I've always really enjoyed it. Like I said, a lovely one, that, yeah. Mon Elephant.
I haven't seen if they're on this year's list, actually.
Don't think so.
No, but there's plenty to go at. As you say, it's a big celebration of jazz in Belgium. Now, the next one for me could easily have been the opener, as it features a 25-piece band, although, in fact, it features many of the musicians in trios, quartets and other settings throughout. But the track we're going to hear is just the core quintet playing. Pianist and composer Chris Hajayan has many film scores to his name, and in fact, if you look him up, you're bound to find film scores before anything else, including the recent Woody Woodpecker score and Beethoven's Treasure Trail, the dog that is, not the composer. But he wanted to put together a storyline of his musical life in the Big Apple. Here's Bright Lights, Big City. Quite right too. Bright Lights, Big City from pianist and composer Chris Hadjian with, in this case, his quintet, and what a quintet they are too. Chris Potter on tenor, Michael Rodriguez on trumpet, John Patitucci on the bass, Eric Harland on the drums, and of course Chris Hadjian composing all the tunes and at the piano, and also some fine Fender Rhodes playing on other tracks too. And I won't go through all 25 people on it, but they're all sort of top names. A fantastic album, My City, My Story, released at the end of last month and well worth a listen.
Certainly is. Very nice indeed. Jumping in, Chris and H with you. A new one you might have seen out from Scope. John Schofield, been around for, goodness knows how long. 1970s, late 60s, 70s. I think I first heard him, or the albums I first heard him play on were around about the early 70s. Rough House and places, tracks like that, or albums like that. His latest, I think I'm right in saying, it's his first solo outing on ECM, cracking ECM cover with a fence and a dog and some houses in the distance, very ECM-ish indeed. It's just called John Schofield. This track is called Elder Dance.
Hi, this is Maria Schneider, and you're listening to Jumpin' In with H and Chris on Manx Radio.
The River. The latest from Vincent Parani on Act, The Joker is the album. Another new direction for, well, yeah, jazz accordion, I suppose. Very rocky, bit metally, all sorts really. Likes messing around and trying different experiments. Quite right too. Enjoyed that one actually. And before that, the latest from John Schofield, Elder Dance. He says, my tunes, it's a blues, 20th century, older people like me doing a kind of jig. He says, I can't do it though. On ECM.
Does make you go back and listen to all those original ECM releases all those years ago from John Schofield. Fantastic stuff indeed. Well, that is about it for this week's show. Next week we'll be off, as we said, to explore the first live BrujazzWe or Brussels Jazz marathon in 3 years. But fear not, through the magic of radio, we'll still be bringing you another great Jumpin' In. Until then, we'll leave you with a fourth track from the forthcoming release from Shabaka Hutchins, a busy man as he's essentially the leader of Sons of Kemet and The Comet is Coming, and Shabaka and the Ancestors. But on this new project, he's just calling himself Shabaka, writing and producing as well as playing all the instruments himself. The album's called African Culture and is out later in the year, and this track is called Black Meditation. See you next week.
See the other side of some Belgian beer.
Bye for now.